Andrew, thank you so much for coming to the show all the way from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me here, Tanya. It has been such a pleasure since getting to meet you, getting to work with you.
I kind of wanted to see if you would be interested in sharing your experience with a guide in Mexico where you were abandoned in the woods as
Oh my
an
goodness.
example of contrast that some people can experience that we don't necessarily want to find our place in those situations, whereas choosing something like Avozinia is just so much more full of curated care.
So I was traveling with some friends. We were in the state of Oaxaca, which in Mexico is further south. If anyone, Maria Sabina is a very big figure within psychedelic community, and especially within mushroom community. She's from Oaxaca. And so this is her natal state. And within her natal state, place she grew up, there are several locations actually where there are several communities that have worked for a very long time with mushrooms and psychedelics in community, in ceremony. And one of my friends was very eager, and he reached out to this one woman who was a guide, and she didn't supply the mushrooms. You had to get those on your own because that was not her thing. And essentially, her thing was that she would guide you, take you on a walk in the woods, allow you to take your mushrooms. She would bring some tea, just, ginger and honey or something. I don't even think it was ginger. I mean, that would have been a nice touch actually, but I think it was just some tea she brewed up in her house and, brought a few thermoses and took us out. And she said she would sit out there with us for 2 hours and then we would walk back. So we get out to the location in the middle of the woods somewhere where we don't know where we are. We've never been here. This could look any sort of way in reality, in retrospect, but we trusted this woman enough and paid her to take us out into the middle of the woods. And we all took mushrooms. She did not. She gave us some tea. It starts raining. Cats and dogs raining, Tanya. Not even a drizzle. Like, it was raining, and the forecast said it was going to be like that for the next 2 hours, essentially. So the time that she had allotted in her schedule to be with us, to be our guide, was sitting out in the rain in the woods with mushrooms starting to take effect. So this didn't seem like a very good idea for any of us. It just started raining. We had just taken mushrooms, and we figured, it's better to relocate. Like, we don't have the proper gear for this. We put up a tarp that was big enough for like 2 people, and there were 6 of us, so we were all getting like dumped on when it got too heavy with water. And it was not a good situation. No bueno. So the guide offered to take us to her place, to take us to her house. And she said she had, a spot that had a roof and we could still be outside, and we can take off our wet clothes and dry off a bit, and she can maybe build a fire. And sounds good. Okay, let's do it. Let's get out of here. So we start walking, and she calls somebody to, come pick us up. And really, like, all of this, if anyone's listening to this, like, any and all of this could turn bad at any moment if you haven't already realized. Like, any aspect of this could have been like a total disaster for us. But nevertheless, just placing our absolute trust in this strange human who's just out here with us in the woods. And then all of a sudden, she calls these people. They're going to come pick us up. We get onto this road, this dirt road that meanders through the woods. And as we're there, we wait for a little while. And she's like, it's kind of weird that he hasn't arrived yet. I'm going to go up just a little bit further the road, see if he's going to come. So she leaves us. She's essentially like, you all wait here. I think that'll just be easier. And she goes up the road. She walks, trudges through a little river with her boots, and is gone. And we're all still under the influence. So in this space, of course, like, my friend who had reached out to her, he started getting, panicky paranoia, not for any good reason other than that he's a hiker. He spends time outdoors. He says, you don't leave anybody behind. He didn't feel in that moment that she had left us behind, but the reverse, that we had left her behind. We need to go find her. We need to make sure she's okay. Maybe she was. Hopefully she was. Hopefully she didn't get eaten by something, right? So he's having this whole paranoid trip. And all of us are just kind of, trying to decision make, figure out what to do, how to get back. None of us know where we are. This road must go somewhere, right? Should we walk on the road? What should we do? He's paranoid. She needs to use the bathroom. She's crying. Like, all of this debacle. right, happening. And we eventually decide to walk in the direction she goes. We walk quite a ways, no sign of anything. So we decide to turn around and walk back, because further down, we had actually passed a house, like way back with a few people out under the porch. So we figured we're not under the best circumstances, but at least there is a house with people in that direction. So maybe they would be willing to help us. So we choose to turn around, and as we're walking back, a truck pulls up. It's the guy who came to pick us up. So that part was real, at least. So we get on his, we talk to him for a moment. He's like, well, where is she? And we're like, we don't know. And so really it just became this whole debacle. He takes us back to the hostel. She later comes. She had this story of the forest is magic and she got lost, and who knows, maybe she got eaten by a time warp, or maybe she went out for lunch. We don't know. So one of the two. But she came to get the rest of her money because she had not fully been paid. We'd only put down the deposit. And that was the story, right? Like, so thinking about responsibility within psychedelic realms, like this person herself had mentioned that she had never taken psychedelics. She is not from this place. She moved there because of a partner. And then, her partner knew the area a little bit more, and he had learned some trails from some other people. So she learned the trails. And so it was just kind of this like game of telephone, like both on what psychedelics are and do and how they work. Being out in the forest for 2 hours, really? Just 2 hours, and then let's walk on home. And then, so it's like there's so many factors of this that really helped me see that there are proper ways to do this work, and there are ways that are take your pick scams, or that are not well thought out. They're either people who don't know what they're doing, people who trust they know what they're doing, people who are willing to make a buck off of it, like you name it. There's so many different possibilities that it could take. And I think for me as well, having had that experience, having come out safely from it, and even in many ways, I kind of stepped into the space of guide. I had the wherewithal to be in that sort of space of being like, okay, let's not lose our shit out here in the woods. Like, let's keep it together. Let's keep it together. Like, let's think cool, calm, collected. We can go back to the house, right? I was trying to keep it kind of solid and all together. So in that, I feel like I had exposure to an experience that is very much less than ideal. And sometimes that's helpful to actually figure out how you would want to do something yourself. So I kind of like being able to be the, if you want it done well, do it yourself kind of thing. It's not to say that what we do is the absolute perfect, but I think we do a very good job. And I think we care a lot about what we do. And I think we know what we're talking about. So these are all good things.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We won't leave anyone behind.
Absolutely. And we don't take anybody to the woods. And there is absolute presence and care. It's curated so well. The space, the time, the atmosphere, it's so held and so marvelous that just, being stone cold sober as the nurse there, and you being stone cold sober as the mind body coordinator and guide there, it holds it. And also having, psychedelic experiences ourselves, like there's, I can't believe it's still even a question in the psychedelic community that should you be working in psychedelics if you haven't done the work? It's such a question that should not even be asked. It's so important to know what that space is like.
As a yoga teacher, for me, like, if you've never taken a yoga class, what are you teaching? You know what I mean? If you've never even been on the mat, if you never meditated, how do you know what even works? Like, so it's interesting. And I think that is a big part of what we do. And I think the mini dose is actually something that for me has been very profound and interesting to learn about and to actually start to work with as well, because I think I had heard previously, like a hero's dose. I think many of us have heard hero's dose, 5 grams. And then many of us have heard of a microdose, but actually to understand that, hey, each of us maybe has a threshold, given our sensitivity, somewhere in between where we can actually really work with it, where we aren't just off the deep end and totally psychedelic. and we're also not in a subperceptual realm where we could just kind of go about normal day-to-day stress. It's like nothing else is happening, but actually to be somewhere in between, right? And in that in-between place, be able to work to create more mind-body connection, be able to practice meditation or listen to music, or if it's your thing to take a bath or to go on a little walk with a good friend or your partner or whoever, right? Like being able to actually cut out that time to be in this space where your perception is so open, where your default mode network is a little bit turned off, and you do have the ability to make new neural connections. So if that's the case, it's like, what do you want to make? What do you want to do? How do you want to feel? And I think that's a very exciting place to be, because there is some degree of making it your own. It's kind of like the make your own adventure book. And that's actually something we teach people to work with as well. So you when you come to the retreat, you have the experience of a larger dose, but you also have the experience of a smaller dose, not a micro dose, but a mini dose. So something kind of in between. And we actually share modalities. And by we, I mean, mostly I share several mind-body modalities within that time, within that space, so that we all get an experience of what it's like to actually understand, like, okay, I'm under the influence, but I am in control of my experience, and I can shift that experience, and I can go more deeply into the feeling and the getting lost in it, and I can pull myself back out, and I can have my eyes open. I experienced that in that trip, that experience. I could look at the sky one moment and then see all sorts of things in the clouds, and then the next moment there's paranoia afoot, and I noticed I was able to be much more clear, and that was a little less present, right? And so we do that, but in a way that takes out all the not so great stuff. That imbues, like, hey, this can be a beautiful time for self-care. This can be an amazing time to reconnect with yourself. This can be an amazing practice, not just a substance, but a practice that you work into your life to do whatever you want to do with it, to connect in any way you feel you need to reconnect. Right. And I feel like what we do is just kind of like start to put those seeds out there, and as well, give them the incubation period, give them a little bit of water, give them a little bit of love. So it's not just like, here's a seed, go have fun, goodbye.
Yeah.
It is like you've had these experiences, you've had context around the experiences, talking about learning. That's important. And that's something that a lot of ceremony spaces don't have. And I do say that I deeply appreciate ceremony, but for many of us, and even many ceremony practitioners, I find that there's little context given. And even talking about like ceremony practices, for example, like certain indigenous style ceremonies that I've been in, there is a context given. There is a reason that we're all here. There is a reverence for the substance, and there's a reverence for the experience with the substance that one can actually speak to. And having that context helps us learn. It helps us create a new model. How could this work for you? What part of this could work for you? And I think that's a very empowering thought.
Yeah, and that is what really stands out and makes us different, is that we are teaching cultivation of the relationship with the practice. So that practice being tuning more into the mind-body connection, tuning out of the default mode network. It's cultivating that practice of mindfulness, meditation, and how to use on your own so that there's no gatekeeping. And that type of cultivation is one part. And then we actually also teach the cultivation of the mushrooms, which is beautiful. So we're like giving you both cultivation aspects, so you are empowered to do it on your own. Whereas some of those ceremony spaces, you're not given those tools. It's set up in a way that you do the experience. It's wonderful to have the reverence, but how do you take that home without that frame of reference? And we need that so desperately. We're hurting in so many ways with chronic illnesses and just an array of debilitating anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia, chronic pain, cancer diagnoses. I mean, you name it, we have gone through the gamut, and it's such a wonderful time to be an opportunity to be really leaders in the field of empowerment, in the field of working with psychedelics in a way that empowers communities, and that therefore those people can go and empower other people in their lives.
So I really want to share a poem on that note. And this is by Martha Postlethwaite. And it says, "Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands, and you recognize and you greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue." Oof, goosebumps.
That is so beautiful.
So I brought that up because I think even for A, any human who's trying to heal, or B, any human who thinks they're a healer or calls themselves a healer or is in healing practices, I think we're all healer. I think we're all capable of healing. I think it's in our DNA. I think it's in the structure of any living being. But I think there is this interesting cultural narrative, and especially within healing fields, and especially around trying to take on your own healing, right? It can feel heavy, even as the person trying to help other people, because sometimes we're like trying to rescue everyone, right? And even with ourselves, sometimes we're trying to rescue ourselves. And then there's this internal battle. And actually we live in a cooperative, collaborative, interdependent body and world. And because of that, it's like, I don't need to be the one. And it's empowering for me, frankly. I love getting to teach people, and I love getting to share what I share, but that's just what I share. It's just what I share, but I want to be able to put it into other people's hands, because I am not the one to rescue the whole world. I'm not going to be there to battle and do the things. It's like, no. We all have that beautiful song to share. We all have that beautiful message. We all have these journeys, right? Of figuring it out, and just going along with it. And it's beauty, and it's neither here nor there. And it's great. It's great, and we can make the most of that. And we don't have to do that alone. So when it comes to chronic pain and when it comes to depression, like that doesn't need to be any one person's responsibility.
Absolutely.
It's not a heavy weight. You don't deserve that. You don't deserve having to be the martyr of your own life. There's a different way that we could go about things. And that part might be a little hard to digest. But I think that is why we teach cultivation too, because it's like, no, take these tools. These aren't our tools. There's not a scarcity mindset thing. It's like, no, this is all of our tools. Like mushrooms literally spread out by spores. They go as far as they can. They get taken by the wind as far as they can. So like, who are we to stop that process? When they're meant to spread out, and that's what they do as an organism. And we as well, we share. It's how we got this far, So I like that we're taking that back and able to, for people in their healing journey, for healers, right, hopefully be able to put down some of that, like, I need to rescue the world. Like, I don't know, try mushrooms. Even that thought, it still rings true.
I love watching you. I got to see you teach at the last back-to-back retreats that we did, and it was incredible. You're an amazing teacher. And what I love about what you teach now is that it's really simplified tools that people can take home. So it's not inaccessible. It's stuff that people can remember, especially when they're beginning to be independent enough to use psychedelics for wellness at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's such a big part of it, right? Because for me, anybody can know anything. Any of us could know oodles of anything. But as a teacher and as someone who wants to share that stuff, if you're only going to share what's up on the mountaintop and you don't even know how to start climbing it, then what are you doing? What's the point of it all? So I like to challenge myself to make things more digestible, to make things intriguing and exciting at any level, so that it's also not like, oh, the simple things are somehow less than or boring. In fact, the simple things are the foundation for everything that anyone would want to do ever, right? So when we kind of skip over that or think that we need to be beyond that level of simplicity, we're missing out on what's the point of it all, really. So that's a big thing that I'm excited about, is, just constantly learning, constantly improving myself. The more that I do that, it's like, what of that really worked for me? What if that really worked for me? And then how can I share that? How can I make that digestible? How can we break that down and make it memorable?
And you were a middle school teacher, correct, before you became a yoga teacher? I mean, these are a group of individuals that probably are really difficult to teach. I mean, did you have to land in an incredible, enthusiastic, and creative way to get anything digestible for them as well?
Oh, absolutely. It has to be fun. It has to be engaging. It has to be fun for me, because if it's not fun for me, it's lost. none of it's going to work, right? And absolutely. I mean, I studied international relations in undergrad, and that then landed me teaching middle school history, social science, civics and ethics. right? But to go from even that as an example, a university level understanding of these things and talking to, students who are 11, 12, 13, of course, you have to break things down and you have to make it digestible and you have to actually do it in a way that I felt takes me off the pedestal, because that's not really the point. It's not like, oh, look how much I know. It's what are you finding out? And how did you find that out? And so that's sort of, yeah, definitely inspiring me even to this day. And even working with adult learning, who am I? I'm the teacher, I'm the sharer, I can be a guide, but really I think we're all in the same plane of existence and we're all trying to do the best we can. So I want to be able to make that accessible to everybody.
One of the things that I think makes you incredibly unique is not only your passion, but your voice. When you're teaching, your voice, it just projects so well. Was that something that you had to find within your life, or when did you finally find your voice?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story, Tanya. So little Andrew loved to write poetry and loved to dance and loved to move and loved to be silly. And then I started getting bullied in like middle and high school, actually, and in a big part because of my voice. So I actually had a much higher pitched voice as a young person. And I had somebody ask me one time, are you a boy or a girl? And it was like crushing to my like little 8-year-old self, right? Like, what? How do you not know I'm a boy? It mattered, right? But it was just very crushing. And I started to realize that it felt like my voice and how I moved my body were dead giveaways that I would, be a targeted bullying victim. And so I actually started to get really terrified about speaking, just sharing my voice at all. Like I would get called on in class and like my heart would kind of like, oh God, I have to say something, and I don't even know the answer. So there came a time where, despite loving writing poetry and having this expressive spirit, nevertheless, there was a class that I had in my last year of high school where we actually had to essentially just create things. It was a very open, creative space, creative writing, and then we had to share it. It came my time to share, and it was a piece of poetry that I'd written, sort of a spoken word, jazzy, like cool thing, right? But I was so afraid to share it that I stood up and I literally went to the front of the room, choked up, got nervous, couldn't feel my legs. And I like probably stood in front of the class for like a minute, like about to cry. And then I was like, I need to sit down. I don't think I can do this today. And my teacher was like, okay, like, do you think you can do it another day? And I was like, maybe. I was just so terrified, and so I realized it took me quite a time to get back to my voice and get back to my authentic voice.
And where was this in the United States?
This was in North Carolina. I am from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So yeah, shout out to my high school teachers who made me speak in public because it was terrifying at that time. But it did push me to try, and it did push me to be open about the things that I thought about and I created and I wrote. And I think we all have that in some degree, right? Things that are going on inside of us or something we made or something we care about. Like we want that to be held. We want that to be received. But I think it gets so complicated for so many of us when it comes to our voice. Even if there's not like that history of bullying, I think we all have some interesting relationship to our voice and our ability to share our message or what we want to say in the moment. And for me, I was able to eventually start breaking through that. Really thanks to my yoga teacher trainings, was when I started to actually like sing. So despite being a teacher later on, of course, you're public speaking every day, but it was also like, I'm public speaking in front of 13-year-olds. Like I can do this, right? Like I got this, you start a little facilitating and then you pass it on. Okay, there's this activity and then I kind of get to step out, right? But it wasn't until I went through my yoga teacher training process that actually one of the things I had to do in my original teacher training was to go to chanting. And I was like, there's no way. There is no way I'm singing in front of all these people and with these people and in this language I don't understand. I was like, there's no way. And then at some point by the end of the training, it's like a month-long intensive, right? By the end of the training, I was like, oh, forget about it. I don't care. This is my chance. I'm going to sing. Nobody's watching. Everybody has their eyes closed in a perfect meditative posture. So I just started letting myself sing. And it was so liberating, incredibly liberating. And from that point on, I've just continued to sing more. I've continued to be able to learn that I can project my voice from different places. And that it keeps it exciting too. It keeps it engaging when it's coming from these different places inside of us. And you can kind of play around with that a little. And I like that. I like that as a teacher, because I think even as adults, it's like that excitingness in our voice that keeps us engaged, because it's so easy. I think as adults, we get really good at tapping out and numbing out and just kind of like, not paying attention to our surroundings or conversation. And so I think monotone just kind of takes us to that place where we're like, oh God, we're back in middle school. We're paying attention to the teacher who thinks it's all about them. And it's so boring. So I love playing with my voice. So I appreciate the compliment. It's been a journey. I am happy to be able to share my voice today how I do.
I've heard you sing and it's amazing. And I'm wondering if that moment when you were in front of that yoga class and you had that liberating revival of your voice, did you feel a somatic release at that time too? Was it almost emotional because it was the first time you let yourself do that?
I can't say on the first time. And I would say that I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. I think the first time we do anything is a little weird. And so I think to actually like have our nervous system engaged in a way where we feel safe enough to have that release, some people do have that, and it's not a bad thing. But I think many of us it actually comes a little bit later that we have that release. And that was my case. It wasn't at first like, oh yeah, I did the thing. I'm going to cry out all my pain of having been bullied. Like it wasn't that easy. I think it actually came much later when I not only was singing in a room with closed-eyed people, but actually I could sing in ceremonies, for example, or I could sing for my students of a yoga class, and I could sing just like walking down the street, and that's when that became when it felt like a gift. It wasn't something I had to hide. I moved beyond something I had to hide to something that was okay to share as long as everyone else was doing it. And then to move into that place where it's okay if I'm the one, and that brought me to more of emotional release later. And then finding, sometimes I still write my own poetry, still write my own songs here and there. But I think with that it is a conduit for me to be able to express. And I think it is for all of us.
That's amazing. I hope that you can teach me how to sing more freely.
Yeah.
Did you ever think when you were becoming a yoga teacher that you would be a yoga teacher with such a particular insight and helpfulness in psychedelic work?
No. Great question. No.
So how on earth did these two things merge?
I came to yoga because I needed it. I needed something to connect me back into my mind, like my mind to my body. It was so easy for me to live in my head. It was so easy for me to live in stories. It was so easy for me to go on about my days and never really feel so connected or like feel my emotions really deeply. I think a lot of what I received as a young person of bullying and having to put a lot of parts of myself away, I think I actually got quite good at several dissociative tendencies within myself, just kind of stepping away and not looking at parts of myself and not being able to access parts of myself. So actually I found like meditation was not itself in and of itself helpful for me, because it was so similar to the patterns that I was already so good at. So just like not having to pay attention to my surroundings and just kind of go off and float, like that was very easy for me. But it was actually, and I think there is a lot of talk around how like yoga is so much more than the postures. But I don't think we need to overlook the ability of holding yourself in different postures and getting to know how you feel from the inside in different shapes actually allows you to feel new things and to create new neural pathways into how you map out your internal sense of where you are and what you're feeling, right? Your proprioception, your interoception. So I needed that. And once I started untapping that, it was like, oh, wow, it opened a whole new world of feeling and being able to then process emotions that I had never processed, feeling emotions I had never felt. And so I think along that same lines of needing sort of this mind-body connection, I also found plant medicine at some point and later found mushrooms, and just psychedelics in general, I think, aim to that same thing. They aim at creating new neural pathways, Maybe it's a side effect, I suppose you could say a little better, is maybe it's a side effect of it. But nevertheless, that became incredibly healing. And then I myself found, as I was having experiences with plant medicine or experiences with psychedelics every few months, every 6 months, for example, plus I was practicing yoga, it's like it just got better and better and better and better. And what got better was how I was able to relate to myself. And as I was able to relate in a more loving way to myself and in a more caring way to myself, and in a more like, hey, I'm actually, when I meditate now, I am paying attention to what's going on here. It's not just kind of tapping out and disappearing. It's I'm so deeply connected to what's here, and I'm listening to my heartbeat and whatever's going on in my gut. And the more that I've been able to do that, frankly, the more beautiful life has got, the more I've been able to connect to other people and shed some of those walls that I think I had of like, other people hurt me, And I think we all have that to some degree, we've all been hurt. And I think psychedelics and yoga both have given me that opportunity to not feel so hurt, to feel safe, to feel held by a teacher, by a guide, and in that way start to be that for myself. Be that person that's able to hold myself in those times that are tough, or that I have a whole narrative or movie playing in my head that's irrelevant or damaging or unhealthy for actually pushing me forwards in a loving way. Exploring with myself and then exploring teaching, because they're both very fun. They're both very exciting. Even teaching, you see what works, you see what landed. I see if I made something a little too complex, even, how do I explain that better? How does that actually work? Am I just saying words, or how does that actually work? How can I make that make sense?
I think you hit on an incredibly important topic. I feel as if a lot of us, most of us, if we're lucky, if we're born well and taken care of, we are born with an internal guidance system. And it's the most beautiful thing that we can access. But as Americans and people who are really busy, we quickly learn that in order to live the American dream, we have to stop listening to that internal guidance system. We have to push ourselves so hard to levels of exhaustion and we force that internal guidance system to be turned off. And that can lead to addictions, that can lead to a complete absence of self-care, that can lead to depression and anxiety. So I feel like what you're doing as a psychedelic yoga teacher is you're actually giving people an opportunity to remember their own internal guidance system, because both of those things that you mentioned are meshing together, are doing that same thing. They're completely like husband and wife per se. I can't think of a better analogy in that.
They're like plants in the sun, honey. They're just growing.
Like it's incredible. I myself have turned early, becoming a nurse in the ICU. I mean, I quickly learned how to turn off that internal guidance system, and it changed my life. It was really hard, and it took years before I was able to remember, oh, wow, I have everything I need inside of me. And still, it's a journey. So teaching people that tool is, it's the only thing that we really need to remember.
If we can't actually understand that we are in the driver's seat in a big way of our mind-body connection. So we can go through life and make decisions, and are often tough decisions, and are sometimes don't even feel like a decision, to kind of unplug and to numb and to go into those hard places. And to start that disconnect, because our brain can get used to that model too. Our brain can get very good at going through the world disconnected. But we also have the capability to, through these simple practices, start to find our way back to that mind-body connection, where I think that voice it is there. It's always there.
There's an element of us having to choose to listen. I feel like some of us, will drive ourselves so hard in careers because we think we have to pay for our cars and our house and our children going to college and whatnot. So when we begin this practice, it changes your life, and it requires an incredible amount of responsibility to be like, okay, how can I listen? I mean, we're talking about beyond self-care here. We're talking about turning the off switch to living lives as robots, and turning the on switch to living in that grace.
And living in a way that we're totally capable of. right? Like we have a central nervous system that is very good at creating predictive models of the world. And if it seems in this predictive model, given this culture or given these life circumstances that one has, if it seems that a mind-body connection is not beneficial, then we start to deprogram that. We turn the off switch, right? But I think we all know, we all get, many of us, right, who have been able to recognize some of these patterns in ourselves, been able to recognize our own suffering, which we all have it. But the more that we're able to recognize that, it does kind of start to push us forward and say like, hey, do something, please, good Lord, do something. You know, like I can't take this. It gets heavy, you know, and so we all find different ways to do something. But I think actually like being able to do something in a way that starts to turn that on switch again, right? To flip it back on and say, no, let's build this back. Let's build a predictive model where I do matter, where I am in the world, and we are interconnected, and we all go through suffering. We all have pain. We all can find it easy to tap out, given that information, right? And given the fact that we know there's a cultural impetus to kind of to leave a lot of this behind, to just work and grind and go and not rest, right? Given all of that information, you know, it's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make a movement, you know? And then there's so many of us who are in this movement. You know, it's not just us, but there are people who are pushing for different ways. You know, some people, if you want to say like somatic practitioners, and some people even bring up that somatic practicing is really only a response to a culture that turns off our mind-body connection, because it's inherent, right? We are this holistic being. We are a nervous system embedded in a skin bag of water. But nevertheless, for some reason, you know, something, all of our signals start to kind of like say, no, you are these compartmentalized parts of yourself. And you have to turn that off, or you have to dim that light, or you have to do something differently than we are.
In order to be here in the world, to find your path, you've got to be here in your body, in the mind-body connection. The interesting thing about psilocybin, having a mushroom experience, is that it does bring you back into the body. And for some people, this is the first time. For some people, the first time that they'll slow down enough to lay down, to do some intuitive yoga, where these people would sometimes know, we know we should be doing yoga. We know we should be going for walks. We know we should slow down, but we can't. And that's sometimes just, for me at least, was just such a marvelous realization that, oh my God, I can slow down enough to feel my body, to breathe, to stretch, to take a bath, to pet my cat, to lay in the hammock, to look at the sky, to look at the clouds, all these things that we miss. And it's like, then we get to know, oh, there is a beautiful space. It's not just another chore to access the mind-body connection, right, that internal guidance. It actually is medicine.
I think as you're saying that, right, like, I mean, even how psychedelics work, right, is fascinating, because I've mentioned several times in our conversation today that the brain is this predictive modeling system, right? But it is, right? So when we talk about that, we're talking about the default mode network. We're talking about the me that gets up in the morning and that knows that I have food in my fridge, and that knows I need to feed my cat, and that knows I want to snuggle with him. And I just know these things, right? And I know we were going to have this call today because I put it on my calendar, right? It would be very unproductive, you know, in many ways, if I woke up and I didn't even know who I was, or I woke up and I didn't know where I was, right? If I didn't have a model to understand and to predict, like, oh, this is my house. I pay rent here. Okay, I pay rent here. Now I need to be able to make rent and have rent to pay, right? So we start to put our world together in this way that the default mode network, these areas of our brain that interconnect, kind of are telling this story of who we are and what we need to do, right? In order to survive, right? Because if we can't predict how to survive, it, in some ways, as far as evolution is concerned, it becomes difficult to know that we can. But with psychedelics, it helps that area of our brain go on hiatus, go on a pause. And so all these other areas get to light up, right? So we are tapped in more to the information we're receiving from our body. It's not just up in our brain. So even that starts to be like a, whoa, there's so much information inside of me and outside of me that I don't even look at, that I don't even notice normally. And really, I think the beautiful thing with psychedelics is so many ways, unless somehow somebody gets to be able to take a break from life being life and hectic and crazy and all the responsibilities to then like become a monk and, you know, shave off your hair and totally become apart from life. We don't have many other spaces where you can really start to dive into that and dive into it so deeply, so viscerally, and so held, right? As we do with psychedelic work, particularly when we're talking about the retreat that we put together, right? Like we are here for that. We know that that's what happens. We know that we're capable of that. We know that that starts to bring all of this lusciousness back into life, because there is more just to life than what we predict it to be. And that's the beautiful thing. Because for me, growing up, if I just kept going on the model that the world is out here to hurt me and other people don't like me and other people don't like my voice, nothing would have ever changed. And that was so detrimental to me, you know. But actually to understand and to experience, like, oh no, there's a different possibility. There's a different set of possibilities, is medicine.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Is there anything that we didn't get to touch on that you wanted to add?
Oh, there's so much, but this has been delightful. And yeah, thank you for taking the time and showing up in the way that you do, because I appreciate it. And I think you are a connector, and you are somebody who likes to elevate other people's voices and messages. And we need that. And we need you. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. And yeah, here's to more of the good work.